Hello, everyone. I'm Crispin Jones from Mr. Jones Watches. I'm very happy this afternoon to be having a conversation with Ryan Claytor, one of the artists who's worked with us now on two designs for Step Right Up and then for Ricochet. And I'm very happy to announce, which I think is kind of known in our community of followers already, that we will be reissuing Ricochet. Start of March is our target at the moment. We're actually well on track with production and stuff, so I'm pretty confident that's all going to happen in good time. So really the reason that I'm having a chat with Ryan today is to talk about one of his other projects, which is a comic book that he's actually hasn't written, but he has illustrated and published himself, called A Hunter's Tale.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much for chatting with me today, Crispin. It's always great to chat with you. And I know that this is a little off the beaten path for Mr. Jones Watches to be talking about a comic book, but hopefully the tie of me to Mr. Jones Watches is enough to make that interesting to some Mr. Jones Watch followers. And as you said, I have a new book coming out called A Hunter's Tale, and you can find it right now at ahunterstale.com, which will take you straight to the crowdfunding page. I'm kickstarting the book right now, and it's running for the duration of January 2022. I think this is going to air right at the tail end of January, so only a day or two left if you're listening to this promptly. So the book itself, as Crispin alluded to, was not written by me. The script was actually a poem that was written by my late grandfather, Charles Kermit Claytor. And my grandfather, who's no longer with us, left behind this body of poetry. And every time I get to this particular poem, it just stops me dead in my tracks. And I have wanted to do something, like I've wanted to make this poem visual. I'm a cartoonist, and I wanted to sort of collaborate with him in this way for a very long time. And I feel like my cartooning chops, after almost 20 years of making comics now, have finally kind of risen to the level that I want to see to match my grandfather's my words in the poem. So I've been working on this over the latter half of 2021, and at the start of 2022, I'm launching the book on Kickstarter, and I can't wait to share it with people. Let
me pick you up a second there, right? Because there's like half a dozen questions that I kind of had that I kind of wanted to cover. Like the first thing, I'm really interested about your grandfather. Like, so he wrote a lot of poetry. Like this was something regularly that he did. He wasn't a poet. He wasn't like this was his job. It was something that he did, for his own enjoyment and his sort of creative outlet. Yeah,
that's very true. Yes. So my grandfather was a railroad dispatcher, and for most of his life, he also had other odd jobs along the way, salesman, and, was into real estate, but mainly he was a railroad dispatcher. But in retirement, mostly is when he started writing poetry. And he was not writing poetry for publication or notoriety or anything like that. Mostly his poems were for friends or commemorations of a birthday or a retirement or an anniversary. And he lived in a small town in retirement. He lived on the North Fork of the Gunnison River in Colorado. And in fact, the first page that you see on that Kickstarter page is an illustration of his cabin, as I remember it from when I was a kid. It really was right on the river there, and we used to go inner tubing down that river when I was little. And
did he read you the poem himself, or is it one that you kind of encountered and like read for yourself?
So in 1990, his church put together a self-published zine, a little book of his poetry. And that's mainly how I've interacted with his work. I do not remember him reading me poetry. I remember, doing odd jobs with him around his land and going snowmobiling with him and playing and having fun. But I don't remember him reading me this poetry. But I wish that I had a chance to talk with him more about this creative outlet. I think I was just too young at the time to really understand what he was doing and realize how cool it was, but I'm so excited to share his work with a larger audience beyond the scope of his life.
I guess I think it's so nice, yeah, really, that you're able to kind of, on the one hand, like revisit your childhood and, sort of revisit the memories of the person that your grandfather was, and yeah, also then to share his work. I mean, I'm really envious. Like, I don't have any relatives with a sort of creative, that sort of body of creative work, or like the treasure. It sounds like a treasure trove, really waiting to be uncovered and to discover and stuff.
Yeah, I think about that a lot, not only looking back, but also looking forward. Like you're leaving a legacy. Like somebody in the future is going to think, man, my great grandfather Crispin Jones, look at this body of work he created. Look at this company he left behind. And I don't know. I think that's such a cool legacy that you are leaving behind. And I hope to also do something similar with my own work, in a different way. Not watches,
like,
but
just like not talking particularly about me, but I think just generally as a generational thing, I think it'll be really different in future, because I think there'll be this huge body of like online stuff that we leave behind. That sort of, as we pass through the world, we leave bits and pieces of ephemera, or like our social media postings or comments on Facebook or whatever, that just you don't have access to. Like, that would be fascinating, I guess, for you to see, if you could look into your grandfather's life from that aspect. I think more actually in terms of the volume of photographs that we'll all leave behind. Just, I think actually managing and navigating and understanding that for a future generation will be really difficult, but really rich as well.
Yeah, it'll be a completely different experience. You're right, because everything that's been left behind up until, about 20 years ago was physical, and that degrades. But whenever you post something online, in one way or another, it's going to be there forever. Like, people can find that for better or for worse. And so digging in genealogical archives is going to be an interesting treasure hunt in the future.
I'm sure there's going to end up being kind of full-time people who will explore. Like, can you imagine leaving like 100,000 photos and someone
Right.
2 generations down the line inheriting that, and just trying to sort of data mine it, or to pull out the interesting bits from amongst the that vast sort of body of stuff.
Yeah, what a different job that's going to be.
No, totally. I guess I wanted to ask a bit, like, I mean, I'm not familiar with all of your work that you've done before, but did this feel kind of different working on, because it was such a personal thing? Or because I know, like, you author your own comic books as well as doing the artwork for them. So on the one hand, like, you are the entire creator, but I wondered how, like, was it a different experience?
Yes and no. So my work for a large part of my career has been autobiographical. So I've had, as you said, complete creative control over writing and illustrating, book design, publishing, the entire thing. And my most recent work, Coin Op Carnival, was not autobiographical, but it was still nonfiction. So I feel like there's a tie there. And then this work, A Hunter's Tale, it's nonfiction. I'm sorry, it's fiction, but it has those family ties, similar to autobio type stuff. But at the same time, I made a decision very early on that I was going to be vehemently faithful to my grandfather's words. When I was adapting it to comic book form, there was an occasional point or two where I was thinking, man, maybe if I rearrange this just a little bit to make it fit the page. Yeah. And then very quickly I thought, you know what, I'm not going to touch this. I want the words to be exactly as they are. In fact, part of the book includes the poem in prose form only, so you can see it as it was originally. So people who are interested can also make that comparison with the comic that they just read.
Super nice. Yeah, you kind of alluded to it a bit earlier, but I was just wondering, like, how long you'd sat on the project, like how long you'd been thinking about doing it. It sounds like it was for quite a few years.
Yeah, these poems have been with me as long as I can remember. A Hunter's Tale was written in 1983, and I was born in 79. So I don't remember a time when these poems were not in my life. With that said, I've been making comics for almost 20 years, and this project is something that I have wanted to get to. But in my early cartooning days, I think I realized that I wasn't ready yet. I wasn't able to make the images that I wanted to make. I still had a lot of learning to do. But over the course of the pandemic and also almost 20 years of making comics, first, I'm feeling a little more confident in my cartooning abilities. And secondly, I think the message of this poem is really needed right now. I'm not sure I mentioned this to you yet, but essentially it's about these two very different subjects, a hunter and his prey, and this unlikely understanding they form with one another. And at its core, this poem is about this reciprocated empathy. And after experiencing everything we have over the past couple of years, especially in the United States, there's been such divisive times, with the insurrection at the Capitol and George Floyd and all these different things that have just been such tinderboxes and sort of making a lot of us retreat into our own into talking with people that think very similarly to the way that we do. And in this day and age of social media, where you can defriend and sort of annex yourself into a particular group, I think that's super dangerous. If you are not talking with people who think differently than you do, regardless of what side you're on, that really makes me frightened. And I've seen so many interactions with people where diplomacy is like a forgotten art. There's no longer a way of having a conversation anymore. There's name calling and defriending and signing off of people in your life. And I hope that this poem can bring back a little sense of understanding and empathy for one another, regardless of what outlook you may have on the world.
I think you did right. I think empathy as a concept is absent from all of these political debates. It is very polarized and it's very sort of black and white. You're on my side or you're not on my side, and
right.
I can't see anyone else's viewpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Just one small question I kind of had on your way of working. Like, I was really struck on the sections that I've seen. I guess it feels almost kind of cinematic, the images that you're composing. I wondered how, I just wonder how you work. Like, do you work photographically? Do you sort of storyboard it out photographically? And you sort of mentioned that the cabin is actually a place, like a real place, but that's from memory, or you went to sort of revisit it and photograph it, or how does that work?
Yeah, so as far as a working method is concerned, I have a very convoluted working method. I'm kind of in and out of the computer quite a bit. I will hand sketch what I think the page layout will look like. Just little boxes and scribbles inside that pretty much only I can understand. Like, if I showed it to anybody, it would just look like gibberish. But it's enough for me to understand, okay, there's X number of panels on this page and it's going to fit like so, and this one's going to be bigger than the rest, and these are all going to be the same size. Once I do that, then I'll hop into a vector art program on my computer and lay out these panels and speech balloons and narration boxes in a much more precise way. And then I'll export those panels into a program that I use to digitally pencil. It's called Eclipse Studio Paint. And there I can use different layers and move things around and get the composition that I want just right. Once I'm done digitally penciling, I will print out in blue line on Bristol so that I can hand ink everything panel borders, characters, environments, text, everything. I still feel like, and maybe this is me being an old man, but I feel like I'm not able to get the fidelity of line that I want digitally. But maybe it's also the fact that I've been manually inking for so long that I'm just more comfortable with that. I don't know. Whatever the case, I physically ink everything, and then I'll scan that back into the computer, threshold out all the pencils so it's nice, clean black lines, and then digitally color in Photoshop, and then do that umpteen times, and I've got a book. That only takes 6 months of my life.
I mean, but I think you're absolutely right, because I think you can really see that it is hand rendered artwork. That I think even if you're drawing it in the best sort of emulation of a pencil or pen tool sort of software package, I think there's something very different about the quality of line that you get. Yeah, just the feel of it. I think you can see that instantly in your work, that it is hand drawn. Like not I'm not saying it's like messy. I'm saying it has that hand touch.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, there's something about digital inking that just has this like slickness, this smoothness about it, and I don't know. Again, I like that sort of slightly wobbly hand-drawn look to it. Like I want you to see that there's a human hand behind this.
I want to talk a little bit about, I was kind of interested that you settled on the final size of the book as being quite a small, quite an intimate object, which I thought was really interesting. I was quite struck by that, because I think often, I like, my perception would be that often comic book creators don't necessarily think about that physical part of it. They think about the artwork, the concept, the narrative and everything, but actually how you will experience that as a physical object, I thought was really interesting part. I mean, is that something that you've done often in your work, or this is something specific?
Yes, I'm a big format junkie. Like I really enjoy looking at different types of books and types of artwork. Like watches have a very small tolerance for whether they look big or look small on your wrist, and books are a similar way, where I feel like there's a standard comic book size and most people just shoot for that. But I have so many different kinds of comics and books on my shelves that, I think you probably understand, when you hold something in your hands and it feels a certain way, you think, okay, this is what I want to make. And I had that experience in 2021 with a book that I read by a Hmong American artist named Dua Chaka Her. And she wrote this book called Traditions, which is about Hmong culture. And it was this tiny book, and it felt so good in my hands. And when I was done reading it, I literally took out a ruler and measured 4 1/8 by 5 1/4 inches tall, and said, called up my printer right afterwards and said, hey, can we make something like this? And they said, yep, we can make that happen. And so I started formatting and sizing my script according to that size. I also wanted it to feel kind of intimate in your hands, like you were having this close personal experience with this poem, because it is so personal to me. And on top of that, it's a poem. And typically poems are produced in these smaller formats and chapbooks. And I wanted it to sort of echo that smaller chapbook size as well.
I mean, I was almost thinking you could have scaled down even more. You could have done the whole thing at sort of watch face dimensions, like really tiny. I'm quite often, I'm trying to encourage most of the print technicians here are fine art printmakers alongside their printing work. But I'm often trying to encourage them to do like an edition on the pad printer. I think it'd be really amazing, like to have. I mean, it would be a tiny print, but there'd be something really magical about it. Also, because paper takes the ink from the pad printer like beautifully, like everything is perfect compared to like the glass or the disc hands that we do, where we have to work a bit harder. Like paper's always boom, everything looks great. But no, I think it is really interesting, and yeah, as a way to kind of embody that sense of intimacy, I thought it was a really sophisticated kind of approach to, just say, we'll just scale down and make this a small book, and then your whole way of approaching it changes then, I think. Yeah,
well, thank you. And it sounds like maybe you and I need to talk about a very tiny edition of something.
Yeah, I mean, It wouldn't be super easy, but it would be nice. um, I guess I had a kind of question just on editioning, really. Like, I don't know how you feel about, I guess, so one of my questions is kind of the Kickstarter campaign, by definition, creates these sort of different strata of, what's the word, different strata of sort of access or sort of exclusivity from the actual artwork, the like one-off pieces, down to, I guess, a digital copy of the book would be like right at the other end of the scale. I just wondered how you felt about that kind of, I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, we're always kind of conflicted. Like, one of our core things as a brand is that we try to be really democratic. We try to make watches at a price point that can be really widely enjoyed. And yet we always release watches as limited editions. So there's always that kind of duality between it's exclusive, but we really want to make it as widely available as possible. And I guess it's a tension. I was sort of interested to hear your take on that. Like, because I guess you want the poem to be as widely read as possible, and yet
that's right.
You need to make a living as well.
Yeah. So I have some thoughts about this. And I'll start by saying I think what the Mr. Jones team does is really perfect, because essentially this limited edition 100 version is like your test run. Like, are people interested in this thing? And if there's enough interest, then you can move it to your permanent collection. And it's not like you're moving the price up significantly or at all, really, for the limited runs. So I really appreciate that, among many other things about your company. But shifting back to the Kickstarter for this book, in the comics world, there is a practice of making what they call variant covers, where they'll have a main cover, and that's, the one that is printed most widely. But then they'll have alternate covers that are printed in lower runs, typically sell for a higher amount and typically resell for an even higher amount. And I had a number of people encouraging me to do that, and that just smelled of commodity to me, and did not sit with me very well, especially for such a personal poem and work as this. This is my grandfather's poem, and genuinely I want this in as many hands as possible. So there is no variant cover. The only change to the book as you move up the tiers is the fact that you can get it signed by me, but aside from that, there is no difference in the book. So I really wanted to make this as accessible as possible, much like you're talking about with your company. I'm not sure how closely you've monitored comic book Kickstarter campaigns, but I've priced the physical book tier at $10 flat, and that includes shipping to the United States. I have not seen a $10 physical book tier in I don't know how long. And typically they're $15-20 for a physical tier, and you might even have shipping on top of that. So I really wanted to make this a very accessible price point, and just really like a no-brainer. If you're on the fence, like, I don't know about poetry and comics, like, it's $10, So I wanted this to be an easy buy for anyone who is interested.
I guess that's made me think of something that struck me before. There was, like, you participate on Kickstarter quite a lot. I see, like, you can see, like, you've had 2 releases on Kickstarter, but you've backed, I think, 80 something projects. Like, is that something, like, it's not something we've ever done or ever really looked at as a company? Yeah, I'm kind of intrigued by it. I guess, is it something that's very common in the comic book world, or it's not so common, or how is that?
Yes, it is somewhat common and becoming more common. I think especially since the pandemic. I've been in touch with some folks at Kickstarter, and there's a gal named Oriana Leckert, who is the comics and publications outreach coordinator there. And I had her come be a guest lecturer at my university class. I teach comics at Michigan State University, for your listeners who aren't familiar. And when she came in and talked to my class, she was giving an overview of Kickstarter and comics and talking about the success rate of comics on Kickstarter. And for a long time, comics projects hovered around the 50% success rate. About half of them would fail. And then 2020 came along, and that number bumped up quite a bit to, I think it was the high 60s or low 70s. And when she visited my class in September of 2021, she was saying that 2021 was tracking to be even better than 2020. So the success rate for comics are skyrocketing. The fact that people were trapped at home for so long and not visiting retail establishments and looking for that comics fix, that that way to spend your time at home, I think a lot more people started venturing out to Kickstarter in search of that. So I think that got a lot more people familiar with the platform, and it's just grown exponentially over the past couple of years. So, but the comics category specifically, I think, is a really tight knit community. I mean, those stats that you were rattling off of mine are similar to many creators on Kickstarter. You can look at their stats and see, 4 backed, or 4 created or 5 created, and then like 75 backed or 100 backed or even more. So it's not like people are just coming to Kickstarter to have a quick money grab. They're coming there to be part of a community. And I'm super proud to be part of that community. It's where I'm going for a lot of my comics these days.
Do you know what though? I read those stats and I thought, Ryan's such a nice guy. And I know he teaches at university, and I bet loads of the students do projects. Ryan's so nice. He's like backing all of his students' projects.
Oh, I do.
For sure. But no, I just think it's kind of interesting. It's an interesting sort of different model. I know comic book publishing anyway has these kind of alternate models that it's been done in the past. And I guess distribution was always the sort of difficulty. Like, it's relatively straightforward to get something printed, but then how do you get it into people's hands? And I guess Kickstarter is a really nice, nice modern method of doing that.
Yeah, it's interesting. It is a means of distribution. I've been making comics for almost 20 years. And when I first started, I was walking into comic book stores and hoping that they might take my books on consignment in the promise that maybe one day they'd sell it and I'd get a little bit of money for it. And I've had students who have launched their first comic book on Kickstarter now and earned over $2,500 for their first comic book. Like, if you told me 20 years ago that I can make $2,500 off my first comic, I would have thought you were crazy. And this is just such an incredible place to find not only emerging talent, but also underrepresented voices that would not have a chance to publish in mainstream publishing. And I don't classify myself as that, but I am making these weird little books, right? Like, if I went to any mainstream publisher and said, hey, how about publishing a very tiny saddle stitched 32-page comic that is my grandfather's poem, they'd laugh me out of the room. But on Kickstarter, these weird little projects can find an audience, and I'm so grateful for it.
It's interesting. I wonder if I was starting doing the watches again, if I might have taken a similar approach through Kickstarter, because I think everything that you're describing, it's reminded me. I designed originally a set of one-off watches for an exhibition, and then I people were kind of intrigued by them, but it was weird because they were in an exhibition, so behind a glass cabinet. So I started thinking, it'd be nice if I actually made some of these watches. But I remember thinking at that moment, like, I will wait 1,000 years before Swatch ever comes to my door saying, will you make a watch that says, remember you will die, or some of the other things. But I thought that there's an audience for it. It's not the mass market audience. It's not everyone who's going to want that. But I guess this is one of the things that technology facilitates. It gives these kind of smaller groups like access to make a community and to make their sort of shared things that they like. I guess I'm always struck by like cars and how there's so little. Like, there's no car brand that's really out there. cars so conservative, they're so homogenous as a sort of genre. Like you think, if you compared it to food, it's like all sort of beige colored food with no, with no spice or no like sort of different nationalities, cuisines and stuff. But I think in time, I'm sure technology will start to facilitate that. Maybe you get crazy cars, or just the bodywork will become crazy, or I think it could be another thing that technology facilitates. But I think, yeah, for comic books, obviously it's so straightforward, like the publishing, the artwork generation, and yeah, to make something that isn't a mainstream kind of comic is, yeah, great.
Yeah, thank you. And I remember reading that part of your origin story, where you made these watches for an exhibition. And I've always been kind of curious, was that part of your university time where you were creating artwork for exhibitions, or how did that come about? How did that exhibition come about?
So I have an undergraduate degree in sculpture, like fine art, and then a master's degree in interaction design. Interaction design, kind of nebulous, vague term, but essentially what it meant was any creative use of technology. And so for a number of years, I found myself in this odd space where I wasn't really a fine artist. I wasn't really an interaction designer because I didn't work for a technology company. I was trying to make something in this sort of odd space between. That odd space between is generally called media arts, or it was at that time, sort of the early 2000s. And media arts was kind of fine art-ish, but with technology. And also at a time when technology just wasn't that mainstream. Like people weren't on their phone like constantly or working at a screen all day. Now I'm sure like 90% of the workforce has a screen as part of their daily work. But absolutely wasn't the case in the early 2000s. So the exhibition, I mean, the watches were shown in a number of places, but they were shown in that context where it's kind of creative use of technology. And that was sort of my way into watches, that the watch is a technology. It's an amazing technological survivor because it's been around for 120 years, more or less, the wristwatch, and sort of 300 years as a pocket watch sort of format. And most technology, if it's 10 years old, looks ridiculous, let alone technology from 120 years before. But I think that's what kind of intrigued me, and it is all to do with the non-functional aspect of the technology. It's to do with the symbolism, the expression of personality, the aspiration, or all those things that the watch kind of embodies.
So was that original exhibition part of your master's exhibit then?
So I graduated in 2000 from the interaction design course, and then the watches I did in 2005. So I spent those 5 years, I did some teaching, and I also did some freelance interaction design, and also some making artwork for exhibitions. Like, it wasn't a very sustainable model for me. And that's why in 2005, I started thinking, maybe if I could manufacture some of these things, I could create a more sustainable thing. Like the exhibitions and stuff that I got to do were amazing. I got to travel to Japan and places like that, put on exhibitions, and it was great. And you feel great. And like, they pay for your flight and your hotel, and that's it. And so you get home afterwards and you've still got to pay your rent at the end of the month. And so it was nice. And I'm really happy that I had that opportunity to do it. But for me, it wasn't really a sustainable practice. I think I could have hedged my bets, and maybe if I'd kept doing that all the time until now, like, my body of work would be so valuable that I could sell pieces for enough money to, really be self-funding and doing that full time. But I think I just felt at that time it didn't feel realistic. It didn't feel like a leap I was ready to take.
Yeah. Or who knows, maybe it would not have ended up as well as your business is right now.
Exactly. I might still be like scrabbing around bitter and cursing my luck. But no, I have no regrets.
So just out of curiosity, between the early aughts when you graduated from your master's program to when you started doing Mr. Jones watches, you said that you were doing some freelance interactive design. Mm-hmm. What kind of stuff was that?
So mostly what I did was I worked with another interaction designer, a guy called Dominic Robson, and we made interactive exhibits for museums. So we made quite a number for the Science Museum in London. We did stuff for Tate Modern in London. we did some pieces for the BBC who had like internal exhibitions for their staff and stuff, like non-public things. But yeah, so interactive exhibitions for like those kind of museum visitor attractions.
Very cool.
Yeah,
That's really neat.
was. Like part of me misses that world of like being able to go into a museum and to be able to go around the back and not be like the public member. Like it was, fantastic. Really.
Maybe one of these days you can make an exhibition of, 10 years, 12 years of Mr. Jones watch. I mean, you've got plenty of material at this point.
I know. You see, I hoard stuff. I always joke about that. I'd say we'll keep that for the museum. And then I don't know if the museum will ever materialize, but we've got enough stuff for the museum right now.
Nice.
Actually, this year is our 15th anniversary. For the 10-year anniversary, we did do a physical exhibition, and we took some of the pad printing and assembly to like a gallery space, and people could come in and sort of see what we did. We're debating whether to do a physical thing. It kind of doesn't really feel like COVID and stuff kind of precludes that at the moment. It might be very different by summer, which like officially the anniversary is June. So maybe we'll be able to do some stuff. I was debating it though, because essentially what we got was we spent a lot of time and money and effort putting on an exhibition that was then visited by not our customers, it was in the South Bank in London, so it was by the river, so it was mostly tourists who were coming to see it, which was great. We were providing free entertainment for tourists, but I'm not sure part of me thinks it might have been better to put all that time and energy and stuff into like our audiences online, really. That's how we reach them, and all the effort into that maybe would have made more sensible.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've found very similar things after doing exhibitions of my own artwork. I feel like it sort of boils down to free entertainment, and after I'm done with it, there's the initial high of the launch date and people show up, but then at the end of it, it's like, okay, I just spent X number of months of my life preparing for this, setting it up, tearing it down, and I could have had another book under my belt or something that would have left a longer legacy, at least in my mind. And so I've sort of resigned myself to the fact that, I'm probably not going to be doing exhibitions anytime soon.
It's difficult though, isn't it? Because I mean, we're of an age, I'm a bit older than you, but we're of an age where that was kind of the aspiration, like to have an exhibition. That would be the logical conclusion to all the stuff you're doing. And
especially as you're going through these university programs and it's kind of geared toward the gallery.
But now you just think it's not that worthwhile. It's like it's I don't know. I mean, it's fun. Like it's always great fun to do, and it's like a real galvanizing thing for people around you. But it's a lot of work. So it's just a lot of stress. I think I just look back at it and I think, all the exhibitions and stuff I've done, it's always you're there at like 2 o'clock in the morning the night before, pulling your hair out, just like some disaster is about to occur, and
that's a young man's game.
Exactly, it totally is. Let's just I just wanted to kind of wrap up a little bit, and just my last question was really something I was kind of struck by. We've collaborated with you on 2 designs, and actually it's been a really enjoyable experience. Like it's always enjoyable with all of the artists, but particularly with you, you're very engaged with it, and it's very much a kind of dialogue and a process that we're really happy to be a part of, to sort of participate in. But I wondered, it struck me that actually that's quite an unusual way for you to work, because mostly your comic book work is you, like you're writing the narrative or choosing the poem or whatever, and then composing all the artwork, and then doing all of your marketing and communication and sort of getting the word out. I just wondered, like I was sort of interested to talk through with you how you feel about working in a team versus working on your own.
That's something that I've been thinking about recently, like in the past few years. I feel like my work has shifted to this like one-person show, to most of my work has been really collaborative. Like if you look at my most recent book right before A Hunter's Tale, was Coin Op Carnival. And that was done with, my best bud, Nick Baldridge. And we co-wrote that. I illustrated the entire thing. We were talking with Wayne Nyans, who had a big part in that. He was the interviewee for that issue. So that was a big collaborative work. Another collaborative thing I've been doing for the past couple of years is designing neon signs. So I work with this incredible fabricator. His name is Josh Goodacre, and he is just a master in neon. And we met when I designed the neon that's sitting right in front of me for our game room here. And I knew nothing about neon at the time, except for the fact that I wanted one. And so I came to him with the design and showed it to him. And he said, that's great, we can do that, but it's got like umpteen different steps of animation, and every different frame is a new transformer, which costs another X amount of money. So we can do it, but it's going to be super expensive. So, okay, so revise it, do a different design. What do you think about this? Okay, that's great, but lit tubes cannot cross in an animated form because the back one, when it's lit, is going to illuminate the front tube. So you got to think about that when you're designing. Okay, next one. And by the third time, I was like, I think I get it now. I think I understand it. And I'm only going to do this once in my life. So I'm going to design the heck out of this thing, meaning make a bunch of different designs before I choose the one I'm going to have with me for the rest of my life. So I don't have to keep sending these to you if you don't want to. And he was like, no, keep them coming. I've been bending neon for over 30 years and I'm finally excited about making something. So like that was pretty exciting for me to hear. And then unbeknownst to me, like the last thing I expected from making my own custom neon was that it was going to turn into a side business. And, people started contacting me and saying, we want you to do that for us. And at this point, we've got well over a dozen designs under our belt from the past, year and a half, 2 years or so, with more lined up. Like after this Kickstarter campaign, there's a very patient, benevolent client who's been waiting for me to get to them. And I'm really excited to do more. So that's another really collaborative effort. And then, of course, with Mr. Jones Watches and team, that's been a really incredible experience. And with each of these projects, I feel like it's something that I could never do on my own. I could never make a watch. I could never make a neon sign. I could not make Coin Op Carnival what it is today without all these different collaborations. And I think the key for collaborating really is, I was talking with a well-known cartoonist a while back. I won't name drop, but he's one of my cartoonist heroes. And he caught wind of this whole neon and watch thing I was doing. And he was asking me about the neon design. And he's like, how's your working relationship with that neon vendor? And I'm like, it's amazing. Like, not only is he incredibly professional, but he stands behind his work. He's just as much of a attention to detail person as I am. And I think we really have this mutual respect. And he said, good, keep that relationship. They are priceless. And, when you find somebody to work with that you can have that mutual respect and share a common goal and, work off one another's ideas, it's true. It's priceless because not every collaboration is that. And so for the collaborators that I have worked with, like Nick, like Josh, like you, I value those so much, and just feel like it's added a completely new and different dimension to the work that I create, and I'm so thankful for it. So thank you for working with me and putting out these watches.
But you're and I'm sure it's the same with the neon guy. Like, you're a very good person to collaborate with because you're all in. Like, you have the project, we go ahead on it, and like, you're really committed to it, and you're really enthusiastic, and that then galvanizes us. We're like, there's some energy behind this project, and we want to match it, I guess, from our side as well. I think that's what great. People respond to, that kind of that motivates everyone, if it's something that everyone's getting excited about.
Yeah, yeah. At this point in our lives, I mean, I feel like I'm sort of a mid-career cartoonist, and I can see back from where I've been, but I can also see like I've only got X number of projects ahead of me. And if I'm going to tackle something, it better be good. Like it's either a hell yes or it's a no. So
Mm.
like if it's like, I don't know about this project, I don't do it. So you're right. If there's a project I'm doing, because I'm so limited on time between teaching at a university and being a father and a husband and making books and everything else, you're right. I am all in on whatever project I'm working on.
Super cool. I think we'll probably take that as our moment to wrap this up. And
Sounds
we
great.
can both say how excited we are to see, well, on the one hand, A Hunter's Tale, which you can learn more about at hunterstale.com.
That's right.
That's the
hunterstale.com
correct
will
website.
take you straight to the Kickstarter campaign.
Super. And if you guys stay tuned for early March, when we'll reissue Ricochet, that's something else to get very excited about as well. So thank
Excellent.
you very much for your time today, Ryan, and for talking about that. I think, I mean, I don't know if we exactly planned where that conversation would go, but I think it was very interesting. Certainly, I found it interesting to, to learn more a bit about your work and your working practice and stuff. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, and same with you. I mean, I feel like I learned a little more about your history today too. I'm always intrigued how entrepreneurs get started, and it's really great to hear how you formed this company too. So again, thanks for having me on and chatting with me about A Hunter's Tale today.